Obrigada por estar conosco.
Thank you for being with us in one of the most relevant digital health initiatives to be held in Portugal. We are at the dentistry school at the University of Lisbon's auditorium. We have had many speakers, international and national speakers, and they are sharing with us their experiences and their perspectives in this field that is constantly under innovation and was accelerated by COVID-19. We will now be talking about mental health, a very important subject before, during, and after the pandemic, and we will be addressing the effect that the pandemic has had in this field of health and the contribution of digital to this. We will now be talking to the mental health coordinator of the Alentejo region. We also have online the chairman of the National Board of Mental Health, and I'd like to thank him for being here. Maria Forte, the coordinator of SNS, the NHS 24 helpline, and Gabriela Moita, member of the clinical psychology. I'm sorry, but with this music, I cannot hear what is being said.
Sentar-nos para conversar de facto de tema que diz respeito a todos.
We will now be discussing a subject that is very important and concerns us all, mental health. We will begin with Matos Pires. Tell us, as coordinator for mental health in the Alentejo, a very specific region of our country, please let us know, what were the challenges of the pandemic when we talk about mental health? Thank you very much. But first of all, it is a pleasure to be here to talk about mental health and the importance of digital. I am here as the coordinator for mental health in Alentejo and advisor of the mental health program, which gives me some edge because I have a national and regional perspective. There wasn't much difference in a year and a half, almost a year and a half since the start of this pandemic. Almost everything has been said about the effects of the pandemic on mental health, or at least the most immediate and more acute effects. There have been national studies. There are studies underway, and they all point in the same direction, that there was a worsening, or at least reaction, above all anxiety, depression, sleep disorders. This is obviously due to a completely new situation. Nobody was ready for it. None of us as citizens, as human beings, the health structures weren't ready for it either, but luckily human resilience is huge. We're not all going to fall ill, and this is a very important message. We won't all have a mental disorder, but yes, there are added risks. Some are more acute, as an adaptation to the unknown. And from that perspective, as advisor of the National Program for Mental Health, I am particularly concerned because I am an optimist, but I have to tell you this less optimistic note. The economic and social effects of this pandemic will have less acute but more prolonged effects in the near future. There wasn't a huge difference in terms of it being regional or national, although the Alentejo is quite problematic because it started this at a disadvantage because anxiety and depression and dementia in Alentejo, we have the highest rates in the country, as well as the highest suicide rate, which is 2 times that of the national rate. So obviously, having started at a disadvantage, then the consequences when we have time and quality to have an epidemiological study of this, then the Alentejo may be more hindered. But the data we have indicate that more than the regional differences, we have age differences. And unlike what we would have expected, or what was expected at the start, where it would be the older people the most effective, all of the national studies have shown that the mental health is deteriorating in the youths. Would you like me to stop for now? Yes, I would like, we will have a first round, but what about responses? Was it able to offer swift responses given this scenario? Once again, an absolute slogan, which I hope is less true. Mental health, and mental health in terms of the NHS, has been health's poor relative. And this pandemic had that good twisted side, which was to give more visibility to a problem that was serious. All of us who work or have been working for a few years in this field felt the difficulty in responding as part of the NHS, and that is what worries me. I will obviously need to find a response to this, but I would also like to say that there was a huge and organized effort on the side of the national program to immediately, as of March last year, to be organized, to be able to respond in terms of mental health issues at the NHS. There was an ordinance after the forest fires in Programa a few years ago that gave some guidelines in terms of organizing services given a catastrophe or a crisis. Obviously, we didn't know what was going to happen or how the pandemic would end. We still don't know. But we also addressed other aspects that are important, like support to healthcare professionals, namely the ones at the front line, and COVID patients and the families affected by COVID. Luckily, that was a response where we were able to be organized. And I say this, I'm quite proud. Mental health consultations, and I'm not just talking psychiatry, I'm also talking about psychology, nursing. At the NHS last year, we went counter-cycle to all the other areas, and they increased. And this rise was naturally due to the fact that we were able to maintain our activity other than in person. And from that perspective, I think it was shown that I will speak a bit more about this, but we need to invest more in these online strategies. I'd like to thank the Ministry of Health's Shared Services, SPMS, which enabled the national program, obviously under the guidelines of the Director General for Health and the government. But because of their amazing collaboration, for the first time, our national mental health program had a website that was able to speak to the public. We can't improve mental health unless we improve literacy in mental health. And in this digital era, a tool that allows us to have direct access and offer information to the public at large is an amazing asset to have. And here too, we were able to gain, and by gain, obviously in quotes, we gained from this pandemic. The numbers are there. There is a quest for information, and it shows that this was a very useful tool. Practical information, contacts of the services, practical responses. What do I do if I have a relative with a serious mental disorder? What do I do? Should I grieve? What do I do when I grieve, etc.? There was a part for children and teenagers, and from that perspective, I think it was a very important response that we didn't have beforehand. Thank you very much. António Leuschner, President of the Board of Mental Health. What came up, what responses came up to these challenges that the pandemic required, namely in mental health. Good afternoon. I will begin by thanking the invitation to be here. It is a pleasure to be here. SPMS is the heir of a few institutions, and I always shared quite a few concerns with them. I've always been linked to information systems in the field of mental health. So I have a common root with all of them, and it's always a pleasure. And obviously, I'd like to greet my panel colleagues. I do apologize for not being present, but I thought it would be good to use digital tools to avoid going to Lisbon. It would be a return trip, and this way I am calmly at home, sharing all the opinions and listening to everything that's been shared. Luckily, digital came to overcome some of the hurdles we felt over the years with regard to access, above all. Access is something that concerns all citizens. It concerns healthcare professionals because they feel that these hindrances, when looking for care, those who need it, whether the situation is serious or not, this is, of course, one of the difficulties we all feel, and the frustration of not being able to address the more serious situations in useful time is always a difficulty for anyone who works in this area, especially for those people at the front line, which happens to a lot of mental health practitioners. When we talk about health, we talk about well-being, not just physical well-being, but also mental well-being and social well-being. People should never forego these three very important components when we talk about health. The WHO has been reinforcing there is no health without mental health and without social health also. Doutora Matos Pires drew attention to the impact that the economic and financial crisis will have on people's well-being in general, and not just for people who have an identified mental health disorder. The responses of access via phone are sprouting almost like mushrooms. And the ones, whether it's by the NHS or those that have been started by the Psychologists Association under their own initiative, and then an initiative shared by the Directorate General for Health, but also municipalities, of course, we were able, due to this, to have easy access, whether it's a common phone call or one that is more accessible to more people, or whether it was online with online consultations. This was, again, something that we need to keep, and we need to empower our information systems in health to make sure that this is common practice, to make sure that a lot of acts when we are looking for an opinion or a response to therapy, for instance, don't entail travel. Travel, which sometimes is a bit of a burden, especially the older people, where going to a health center isn't something that they do easily. Namely, in the more peripheral areas of Portugal, where the distance citizens have from their nearest health center is quite large. Of course, we want every citizen to have a device with video access in the short run. That's not going to happen, but at least we're making sure that through the municipalities' networks or other networks throughout the country, we will be able to assure that people can take part in this process in as transparent, as universal a way as possible. The NHS is general and universal. as well as tendentially for free. These issues are things that show up as a priority in the field where the subjective well-being, or another way of talking about mental well-being, which is not just psychological, it is psychological, it's behavioral, it's cultural, it is spiritual. In some cases, going beyond the skill, the competences of what is tangible, say religious nature, we are talking about subjectivity, and subjectivity is something that merits our respect. And let's hope that once and for all we can use this and deal with this in a more frontal way, giving people more attention and not just their physical symptoms. The responses were the ones that we had. The parallel drawn with the situation of the fire catastrophe, whether June or October, was the model that has worked in other areas. The regionalization of these responses is an attempt at bringing the solutions closer to people's needs. The system or the service will meet the people that need it, and it is not, people aren't just sitting there. And when we talk about subjective well-being, or the perception of well-being by the people, whether it's the panic of becoming ill or managing their grief when they lose someone because of COVID, or whether it's because they are ill, at many times people may need support. Although we aren't necessarily talking about serious mental disorders, most of these reactions are almost universal. They can achieve levels where the responses are more specialist, are more necessary. And here, yes, there is a referral model throughout the system that can be a great response, whether in the medical field for general practitioners or in psychology, which now is showing up in primary healthcare. But I'm sure that Dr. Gabriela Moita will speak about that. Or whether we're coming closer to home care, where a lot of the nursing teams of the services, whether it's primary care or hospital care, they will have more guarantees. And that is how we need to make things easier, to make sure that someone doesn't have to go to Lisbon for a 5 or 10 intervention and and I'd like to thank the organizers for having this video, and I think that for now it will be possible. Madam Director of NHS 24 Helpline, a service that has been mentioned by António Leuschner, what role did this line of psychological help, how did it operate, and what stock can we take of this year? Well, the psychological advice or assistance line of NHS 24, which is a service that I feel is a highly relevant response on a national level, because it allows any citizen anywhere in the country to have access through their phone to a psychologist. So it is a universal response for mental and psychological health that we feel contributes to improving mental health for the Portuguese population and foreign population residing in Portugal too. The psychological support system came from a need that we identified directly. The Minister of Health identified this directly, and the SPMS through NHS 24, together with the Psychologists Association and the Kaluskal-Binkin Foundation, provided a solution. So in a very expedite manner, these three bodies, SPMS, the Psychologist Association and the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation, having heard the Director General for Health, they developed this solution, this service. The Psychologist Association offered training to the psychologists, and the design of the intervention, of the psychological intervention, the Carlos Gulbenkian Foundation funded the start of this helpline. It is now part of the services of the NHS 24, and we, with the NHS 24, with all the technology we needed to create from scratch for this service, in about 2 or 3 weeks, so say mid-March to the end of March, because the first phone calls were on the 1st of April, we were able to create and implement this national response service. The intervention focus of this line is very specific. It is for acute situations, so managing emotions, promoting resilience to deal with crisis situations, insecurity feelings, generating self-efficiency, identifying coping mechanisms that are more suited, whether for the citizen or the NHS itself. It is a brief, a quick, focused intervention for a series of signs and symptoms. When we realized that we were starting lockdown with the pandemic, that nobody understood what it was about, we realized that it would affect people in a different way, healthcare professionals, because of the overburden of what they were experiencing, the new situations that were happening, or because of the citizens, and this pandemic affected the whole of society in different ways. Some because they didn't have enough work, others because they were overworked, and not just. And so we needed to come up with this solution in a quick way, immediately, and one that was highly accessible, so that no one would be discriminated. And it would become a gateway to the NHS and other situations of mental health pathologies or disorders. There were agreements signed, and the intervention line, or the helpline that was designed, is for this quick intervention, but in serious situations where people are really vulnerable and the situations happen in a mental health crisis, the line, this helpline, will refer people to triage so that that person will have in-person care if so required. Or situations that concerned us greatly at the time and haven't happened very frequently now, which is suicide, or the danger, people's life being in danger. And there we needed to be interconnected, this service needed to be interconnected with the paramedic service. So from the perspective of gains to the population, I believe that this is a response with a posture, as Dr. Marx said, it had this twisted effect of putting mental health on the table. Given this need, we reacted in the quickest way possible with the tools that we had. 1 year later, 15 months, as the minister was saying, the Director General was saying, this is an integrated service within the NHS 24. It is a stable service with a number of psychologists that answers the phone 24/7. We always get about 200 odd phone calls a day. We get more when we start lockdown, or when the number of rises, the number of people ill increases, then more people call it. But we are on our path. We are now more stable in terms of demand. We are revising our approach and exploring new paths for this response, namely to promote literacy in psychological healthcare, literacy in health in general, so that citizens can have new tools or find the tools or strategies that are suited to be able to deal with the crisis situation. Thank you very much for your intervention, Gabriela, Moita. This year, our habits, our dynamics, the way we live has changed. Family-wise, professionally-wise, homes became offices, schools, and it was necessary for us to adapt. At the kickstart, at the start of this, we didn't even realize the radical changes that the pandemic was requiring. We needed to react, and react we did. We have been talking about the healthcare professionals. We've been talking about the Portuguese people in general. Do you feel that the mental health of the Portuguese is on a different threshold? I.e., that people realize that it's okay. It's okay to ask for help. Hello, first of all, I'd like to greet everyone here, those here and those who are somewhere else. It is a pleasure to represent the Psychologists Association. This is a very interesting subject, and we can talk in terms of speculation about everything. I do believe that, yes, there is more awareness of feeling, because a lot of people talk about it, whether on TV or the different places where people meet, where they can meet. Or the press has spoken about this, bringing more attention to the fact that, yes, people may feel worse. That was very important. It was very important, as was said by all medical experts here. We have the right to feel the way we feel. Difficulty in dealing with the situations. We are still trying to understand the aftermath of all this. What's the wake? Not just in mental health issues, but how we will reposition ourselves in our daily life. What will we be like? But one of the major issues, and I think the healthcare professionals have helped with this, is helping people understand that insecurity, malaise, this new name that I learned, this languishing, this sense of, well, it's languishing. It's between mental health, where we have joy, to pathology, to actually being a pathology. And here we are. In Portuguese, he's trying to translate. It's almost like all of a sudden things don't matter. Grandparents say, I'd love to be with my grandchildren, but now I don't feel like it. I really want to go out, but now it's so hard. This is the state we're in. In our era, this is new, and the issue brought in is quite important. People can talk about their malaise, and the impact will be positive. In this stage, everything we've been speaking about here and the intervention in primary healthcare, as was said before, if everything is attentive, we will prevent a lot of situations, because we will solve them in intermediate stages, and this absolute need that we have to have experts. And I will talk about psychologists. There weren't many, but now it's being discussed in Parliament that we have an X number of psychologists per inhabitants and the interventions that can be done. And we're talking about psychology. We're not just talking about medical psychology. We're talking about primary healthcare, but we talk about schools, labor, employability. What needs to happen to have a healthy workplace? And this is what the Psychologists Association has been caring for. The number of documents that have been produced every single day through our association to be able to reach all these areas of intervention, which at the end will obviously fall back on healthcare. It's the workplace, it's schools, everywhere where we find human beings, and that is where we need to care. a lot of these responses that the association has tried to give. Is digital an ally? Let's go into digital. It has to, doesn't it? We're talking about digital transition here, so we cannot overlook this. We are living, we just need to know how this digital transition will be done. We have extraordinary allies. What we are able to do, and Dr. Leuschner spoke about, it's the fact that he's here, but he's not here physically. This possibility of being everywhere is a conquest by human beings, and it should be matured, it should be thanked. The response by NHS 24, by the NHS, even the online medicine, online consultations, online psychiatry are amazing. We will have a lot of apps now that are extraordinary allies. We cannot deny this because knowledge brings this, but what we need to do is care for the way in which they use their study. And as we spoke about earlier on, research will need to be accelerated so we can understand the impacts of each one of these huge tools. We're not just talking about video calls. That's perhaps the easiest one. The ones for which we have data, some apps and applications already being studied. This is a world that we are yet to discover, we are yet to harness. Our association already has a lot of possibilities, and we are studying and using these digital possibilities, and we need to be aligned with all the services. This is very important, and our association has tried to do this. It is not just join what's here, but promote new articulations. We have this task force that was now designed to study the implications of the pandemic in the life of the Portuguese. Margarida Gaspar is the coordinator of this task force. We need to use the most, taking care of the lesser risks. And Marcos Pires, you spoke about these responses that are now arising that we need to grab and develop in the best way possible. We are talking about an important field here, which is digital literacy, not just of patients and citizens, but also professionals. Is this something to invest in? Yes. From my perspective, this is now the time for us to take the necessary leap. Telehealth is something that has been discussed for a few years now, and its operationalization within the context of mental health hasn't had the development we wanted. In health in general, and specifically in mental health, this is the moment to use what we had and was lying slightly dormant and develop more strategies. From this perspective, I think that they are particularly important because you cannot have mental health with only one professional class. You can have mental health, whether in terms of prevention or treatment, with various classes of professionals: psychiatrists, psychologists, social centers, occupational therapists. The digital mechanisms offer us a possibility of integrating and having a quicker contact, visual contact, which is very important in mental health, to look at the other, to listen. If I could hear our speaker here, and it would be different to looking at them as also. And anyone who works in this field knows how important nonverbal language is. So this interconnection, professional interconnection to solve one specific area. And here, digital will bring us important added values. Likewise, digital brings us the integration of healthcare. We spoke about the NHS 24 helpline, which was amazing and developed very quickly. One of the steps that I, as a person who is responsible for the mental health problem, what I hope is for there to be articulation between what is done in terms of the NHS 24 helpline and the primary healthcare. We cannot improve healthcare unless we have this interconnection. Obviously, human resources in mental health are precarious. We need to increase them. But I'm also certain that if we increase human and technological resources without having this foundation of a paradigm shift in the way we work and interconnect, whether professionally or having integrated healthcare, then the person who is on the person who is here, if they're just walking and or if they have to take a lift and stop at each step, I think that digital will bring us a lot of benefits that people won't have to stop as much. I'm looking at the region where I work, an aging area with low population density. You don't have public transport available. In this area, this type of instrument to connect to the mental health unit of the Alentejo, connecting it with some of the services where we take longer to get there than to come to Lisbon, that is effectively an added value, and that's the road we need to be on. And I hope that in a project with Mertula Healthcare Center will be quickly put into practice. A quick note to draw your attention to the fact that there's always something that isn't perfect. If in a private context, it is easier, and we are aware of this, to manage online consultations. In public services, we need to take care because we do not know who is on the other side, what they can say or not say, what pressure there is. And I think that this also brings us to other issues which has to do with ethics and deontology. It is not we cannot replace in-person contact in mental health, but digital gives us a great added value that will not replace contacts in person. So they need to complement each other. António Leuschner, we are at the right time to look at mental health in the eyes and define what we need for an articulation that will allow us to provide effective responses in this field? Well, we should say that for the wrong reasons, we were finally able to draw the attention of political decision makers and the people who are responsible for organizing the services in other areas of healthcare professionals. We cannot overlook something that has been discussed here, but perhaps not emphasized. Mental health is not just an issue of health. It clearly cuts across all the sectors. We will never be able to to reach our goal unless we articulate with social security, schooling system, and municipalities, because these are all part of people's lives and the way people live and how they feel the subjectivity. So if we want to focus this system on people, then we need to make sure that they have access. We need to make sure that they have continuity. We need to make sure. This is something that Anna Matt's speech just spoke about, the issue of trust. Trust the person on the other side of the screen. And you can't get that trust by online observation only. You get it above all through direct knowledge, knowing the person. And that is why we need in-person contact, where digital is a compliment, an increasingly important compliment. I don't doubt that that is the step that we should take, and I hope SPMS is able to develop the necessary tools to complement this the electronic record, the medical record, and a system that will be enriched by these possibilities of access, and that will make sure that when a speaker asks for help, that help is substantial. I believe that we will now stop complaining that we are the poor relative, and we will try to look and be seen, not just us, but probably those who have more serious mental health disorders as part of the citizens of this country with equal rights and equal rights for respect for those, that we have equal respect. And let's hope that we will have this universality, transforming that twisted effect into a desirable side effect. So we can start saying that we will emphasize mental health, particularly the stage where the eldest were the ones that merited the most attention. These were the fringes of the population that most felt the problems at the start. In terms of psychology, behavior, isolation, loss of contact, a sort of feeling of abandonment by the system. I hope that there are many, many more discussions of this type with more people taking part so that we can fuel this network of contacts between the various bodies, hospitals, primary health care, social security, schools, municipalities, the whole system. Because you cannot health without mental health. It is part of policies too. So thank you very much for your invitation and the opportunity to be here to protect Our Lady. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you for your availability. It is always such an amazing exchange of knowledge. We are almost finishing, so I will ask you both the same question. Today is Children's Day, where we recall the rights of the child and our rights too. What message should we leave for the future generations? Because we are talking about future generations for whom mental health, we hope, will be par for the course in their lives and in their routine, something that cannot be overlooked. Maria Cortes. In terms of the Children's Day, it is essential to recall that this day exists because it is essential for us to advocate and protect the rights of the child. Unfortunately, this doesn't happen everywhere in the world. Not all of them have access to healthcare, to education, to a life of equal opportunities. That is why it is essential for us to never forget this. On the other hand, I think it is essential that after this pandemic, we leave behind a better world and a better society for those who are our children, who are at school, who are seeing us, who missed us during this year and a half. And they deserve for this to be a place for learning and to develop tools that will enable them to have a happy, free life with access to everything that we have taken from this pandemic. Thank you very much, Gabriela, Moita. Well, I'll just subscribe what was just said. The right to literacy for everyone, technology and everything else. And I'd like to focus a very important subject. And since we've been speaking here about the fundamental aspects of human development, we should be, human beings are about contact, and contact can't be digital alone. And what was lost with children was the possibility to play. Children go to preschools nowadays and places, and that is one of the problems we had in terms of anxiety and depression, but above all anxiety, which will probably be the drama of the new generations. And in this sense, digital can be dangerous. You have digital apps that show people how to solve problems, how to solve issues, but they don't teach something that playing teaches, which is you can fail, you can try again, manage frustration, all of this while playing. And children who had less room for this, and this happens everywhere. We need to prevent everywhere. In preschools and kindergartens, increasingly, you have less room for people to solve their problems. They are constantly being solved. And the problem with IT, the lady is trying to come up with the word. The person who's on the other side, I believe it's troubleshooting she's looking for. It's troubleshooting. The bots, a virtual system. This doesn't help. It can be an extraordinary item, even in training people, but you cannot overlook, you cannot lose this space experimenting with each other individually and as a group. And for people, it's play. Play should never end, and technology should be an ally, and we should add, not replace anything. It's not a video game that will replace this. No, thank you very much for all four of you for this participation. This was a very important subject, mental health. And I hope that this is one of the many debates that come up for this, not just in times of pandemic, but also in the future. We will now have a short break. Thank you.